be a live stream. I will be joined later tonight by Emmanuel Watson of Sports Head Radio. We'll break down the playoffs. But tonight, I've got a treat. Matt Hicks, the fantasy football educator on Twitter here. He is a dynasty expert. So if you like dynasty football, this is the guy to talk to. There's other dynasty people on Twitter as well, but Matt's joining us tonight. I believe you did write some draft articles at Sports Illustrated before you started your business as well, because I was researching your information before we started. But let's talk about the 2024 draft, because a lot of players in the 2023 draft that were supposed to be as good as advertised, like Bryce Young. Okay, he had a bad rookie year, but then you look at Stroud, you look at Bijan Robinson, you look at some of the rookie receivers in this draft. I absolutely loved what I saw from Zay Flowers when I went to last year's Shrine Bowl in person in Las Vegas with my older brother. So I took Flowers in the 12th round of a keeper league, and that investment has paid off quite well, because I can keep him until 2030 with the new keeper rules. It only cost me a 10th round keeper to keep him in 2025 after next season, if the Ravens were to make the Super Bowl 59 or this year potentially. So that's what we're talking about when it comes to return on investment in keeper leagues. But you also have dynasty leagues as well, where you can draft the players and keep them as much as you want. So what stood out to you with this year's rookies? And then we'll dive into the 2024 class.
Yeah, I think we ended up with a really good rookie class. It's funny. It's so relative. Even folks are down on Bijan Robinson. He finished as a running back 1 on the season. You have Jahmyr Gibbs as a top 12 running back. I mean, certainly plenty of impact wide receivers. But I think what you saw this year, maybe that stood out the most is, you can get Puka Nacua in the 3rd round, and he's a wide receiver 1. You got Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice, Tank Dell, right? You got so much depth of last year's class. And I think that's one thing when you're looking at these rookie classes, it's so easy to get caught up at the top of the classes. But, those 3rd round picks, you can get a ton of value out of them. And, that kind of translates straightforward here to this 2024 class, because there's a lot of talent at the top, but depth is the name of the game. Like when we talk about the value of this upcoming class, it's good at the top, and it's got a lot of depth as well. So it's an exciting group to be thinking about.
Well said. I mean, this tight end class was pretty deep in 2023, but I also feel like there's more stars in 2024. But we'll start with the QBs. 2024, I think that there's 2 QBs that check off boxes. And when I'm talking checking off boxes, I'm talking arm strength, I'm talking short accuracy, medium accuracy, deep accuracy. Can this QB go 1 through 6 when reading progressions? If there's a 5 receiver set, if there's a 2, 3, 4 running back set, you have a tight end, you have a running back, you have 2 running backs. Can this guy really navigate all his progressions? I look for 1-step, 3-step, 5-step, 7-step footwork to footwork, and I to figure out, can this quarterback play in a West Coast offense, a balanced run-first offense, vertical offense, and can this guy play in a spread offense? Can he play in I try to look for variety when scouting. And I think there's 2 guys that check those boxes in Caleb Williams and Drake May. But the problem with Caleb's is he doesn't check those boxes consistently. And he might be rawer than Bryce Young or Lawrence with Urban Meyer if he goes the wrong team right out of the gate. But I do think he's also a player that if you put the right supporting cast around him, he could take off in year 2 and would take off in year 3 at the very latest. I think he's a long shot to take off in year 2, especially if the Bears were to take him and they fired Eberflus the next year. He'd probably need that 2nd year of development. But you have him, you have Drake May. And I did some Jaden Daniels tape this morning. I think he's probably like he might be the best short-term asset in fantasy, because I think Jaden's got the best deep ball accuracy, but I also love his ability as a dual threat. I saw him make a 7-step drop, and then he took off and scrambled for 40 or 50 yards. I think the only few QBs that can do that are maybe Michael Vick, Randall Cunningham, Lamar Jackson. Maybe Richardson did that once at Florida. Maybe I'm underestimating Richardson. I feel like there's a select few quarterbacks that can do that on command. 1-step, 3-step, 5-step drop, take off and scramble. Yeah, I've seen a lot of guys do that. But 7-step drop and then to make a big play like that, that's a rare ability, I think, in terms of athleticism. Maybe you disagree, and that's fine. But I was impressed with that play. I really was.
Yeah, I think those three guys are definitely at the top of the class right now. When you look at them between Williams, May, and Daniels, Caleb for me, it's kind of the tale of two seasons. If you go back to 2022, you see a quarterback that is fearless. He uses his arm strength to sling it into tight windows with really nice accuracy. He's very mobile, moving around the field comfortably. But in 2023, you saw a guy who was almost trying to play too much hero ball. And I think that really takes away from, what you were talking about, this confidence of year one. I think you put Caleb Williams in an offensive scheme that's going to work with his skill set, that's going to protect him, give him some time in the pocket. I think he can be, the type of quarterback that makes a QB1 or, QB2 type impact in his freshman or first season in the NFL, I should say, because he's got tremendous arm strength. I think he's shown the ability to work through progressions well. I think he's shown a really nice mechanical foundation. He was just really not set up or schemed for success in 2023. So I do think there's still translation opportunity for Caleb Williams, and that's why he's my quarterback one. And then, of course, Drake May, you have a huge arm talent. You have a much improved mechanical skill set this upcoming year, or this past year, I should say. So, some really sneaky athleticism with Drake May, too. I mean, he can execute design runs really well. He's kind of got a power rushing style. So I like Drake May as well, and I wouldn't skip past him in the conversation. But Daniels is special, big dual threat. You can't underestimate the rushing ability, right? What that can mean for fantasy football purposes and that upside. So Jaden Daniels naturally is going to get a big bump on the fantasy side of things. And he progressed tremendously as a passer from 2022 to 2023. His comfortability in the pocket increased exponentially. So, with Daniels, you got somebody who's really on the upswing. I think May is on the upswing. And Caleb had such a high expectation level going into this season. He's on a downswing momentum wise, but he's still QB1 for me. And I think, across consensus.
Yeah, because I still think he's got the highest ceiling at the end of the day, like you said. And with Jaden, most people came into the season with the perception that he's a 1 to 2 read QB. But if you saw him in the first half against Alabama, he did go through, he had a 4 receiver set. He went through all 4 reads quickly, and then he chucked a first down to Brian Thomas Jr. That's just one example. I know some people on Twitter that are very good draft analysts like John Vogel and another, I'm trying to think of the other draft analyst on Twitter, not Dame Parson, but there's another, he's good. He's amazing too, but there's another guy that I can't think of his name at the moment, but he said that he can make 5 progressions. So I've heard multiple people tell me Daniels can make 5 progressions. He made 3 against Mississippi State. I was a little skeptical at first after the Florida State game because that was a bad way to open the season. But at the same time, I rewatched the first half of the Alabama tape, and now I know Daniels can make 4 reads if he has to. So I'm a little bit comfortable about some of the objections I had initially. So I think he's got a firm grip on QB3 because some of these other QBs that I had in that conversation, like Ewers, like Penix, like McCarthy, that I thought checked a lot of boxes at the beginning of the year, those guys showed a little bit more of their weaknesses during the college football playoff. Whereas Daniels, he played his heart out against Alabama. He played for a top 5 pick against Alabama, even though he got injured in the 4th quarter of that game.
Yeah, I would say with Daniels too, when you're talking about his progressions, one thing I noted in my film review is that he sticks in the pocket. He'll work through progressions under pressure. He doesn't panic. He doesn't get happy feet. That's one thing where when you're looking at Michael Penix Jr., especially in the national championship game, but throughout his tape, you could see he's got happy feet. When that pressure does get to him, he's quick to jump out of the pocket. And he makes it accurate throws. Jaden Daniels did a great job in 2023 of sitting in the pocket, continuing to work through progressions under pressure. And there's multiple times that, he takes a hit while releasing the ball, still makes an accurate pass. If you want to talk about the Alabama game, that ultimately was his undoing. He got knocked out of the game because he stuck in the pocket under pressure and took a borderline illegal hit there, as part of sticking in the pocket under pressure. So I agree with you that he works through his progressions well. And I think, when you talk about translation to the NFL for the quarterback position, one of the things you talk about a lot is you want to look at They call it, the phrase they'll use is like how fast the game moves, right? And when you have a quarterback at the college level that is able to sit in the pocket, be calm under pressure, you start to have a little bit more confidence that the game's not going to be too fast for them when they first get to the next level. And Daniels has more college experience than Caleb Williams, than Drake May. So, that could really be a benefit for him when you're talking about an
And
immediate
his
impact at the
work
next
ethic
level.
is off the charts. Like
Yeah.
LSU, I cover all the drafts: NHL, MLB, MLS, NBA. LSU had their curfew for their baseball team lifted because Dylan Cruz was staying all night at the team facilities. And Jade Daniels kind of followed suit in that respect with the
Yeah.
football program, to the point where he's in the facility 95, 100 hours. He's watching film late at night. He's eating dinner at the facility. He's helping teammates with homework if their GPA is lower to get their GPA up. And he's doing everything you want your leader to do, and then some. And he's willing to put in that extra work. I think his work ethic is on a Jalen Hurts type level, even though he's not as proficient in terms of maximizing his ability. But I feel like he makes up for that with his work ethic. I feel like he makes up for not having the most perfect ceiling with the work ethic. And this is my co-host, Emmanuel. They just called me on the phone. May I take this? Hey, Emmanuel, what's going on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Me and my guest, Matt Hicks, can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
So we're talking about the quarterbacks: Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Caleb Williams. You got any questions you'd like to ask Matt about some of the other guys like Penix or McCarthy on this class?
Yeah, I have some questions. Um, what are the different, what are strengths and weaknesses, like compare them, like basically pros and cons in regards with Penix and Jaden Daniels?
That's a question for you, Matt. Like the Penix and Jaden Daniels, like the strengths, weaknesses, differences on
For
film.
Penix and Jaden Daniels.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think when you're looking at Jaden Daniels, what we were just talking about here, the strengths are going to be the dual threat, the rushing ability. But also, for me, his biggest improvement from 2022 to 2023, you're going to see a player that looks a lot more poised in the pocket. He leads his receivers well. He's got great anticipation. And what I love about Daniels, accuracy at all three levels of the field. We don't always see that from a quarterback prospect. So his ability to be accurate in the deep field, I think, is something that is really impressive for me. Michael Penix Jr., when you're looking at the pros here, you're going to look at somebody that's got good natural arm talent. He's got good accuracy at times. I think he is very comfortable in the pocket. And then you're going to see here, I have more reservations than most on Michael Penix Jr. I struggle with his mechanics. I think his release, it never quite comes over the top. That's going to lead to inaccuracy, which we see really consistently. He throws behind his wide receivers a lot. A lot of folks, you look at that completion percentage, it looks impressive, but Roma Dunze is doing a lot of the work. Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk is doing a lot of the work as well. So, and then, of course, with Michael Penix, the big thing you have to keep in mind is that he's going to be living in the pocket at the next level. He's not going to be consistently running the ball. And, of course, he's got a long injury history. We've got 2 ACL injuries, 2 shoulder injuries. So, in total, he's had 4 season-ending injuries in his career. So, I'd say, Michael Penix Jr., for me, the cons outweigh the pros a little bit more than most.
That's a great point. I know William Yanish, one person I podcasted with, described Penix's release as clunky in the scouting report. That is the word he used, clunky. You seem to agree with that just based on how you describe Penix, the way he throws, his playing style. My question,
that's a fair word to use, yeah.
My question for you is, what Senior Bowl QB do you think is going to potentially put themselves in the QB4 conversation? Because I had Penix as 4 and McCarthy as 3, but I'm hearing that McCarthy is going to go back to Michigan regardless of what Harbaugh does. This is coming from the same Michigan insider that said Will Howard's going to Ohio State 5 days before it was reported to the public, and they ended up being correct. So I do have McCarthy as QB3 in my current rankings, but that's going to be updated to Jaden Daniels as soon as McCarthy officially announces he's returning to Michigan. But if he doesn't, I think you get into a McCarthy versus QB1 at the Senior Bowl debate for the fourth QB after the top three.
Yeah, for me, next up would be a conversation between Bo Nix and Michael Pratt. I like both of these quarterbacks a lot. I think Bo Nix, he gets talked about a little bit more, but you watch his tape, he's got great command of the offense. I think he has really good accuracy, especially in the midfield. One thing I love to see is QB accuracy in the midfield. I think that translates well. He adjusts velocity very well. He's got great decision making. So Bo Nix, I don't think he's a guy who steps onto an NFL team and takes over, as QB1 on an NFL roster right away. But he's the type of guy, you give him a year to learn the system, win over the locker room. Year 2, year 3, if there's an injury in front of him, he just seems like the type of guy that can really kind of step up and take advantage of a situation. And then you have Michael Pratt, who I think is really underrated, the quarterback out of Tulane, 6'3", 220. I like this tape a lot. I think he's got a really reliable mechanical foundation. Mechanics are important for me. He's got a really clean platform that he throws from. He's got good footwork. I think he feels pressure really well. He's really mobile also, so he's going to have a little bit of that dual threat element to his game. I think, he's not going to be one of these guys that has the best pure arm talent in the world, which is why, he's not getting as much hype, but he throws a tight spiral. He's got enough arm talent. I think we've seen in today's NFL, you don't need to throw the ball 60 yards downfield to be effective, right? Especially depending on what scheme you get drafted into. So Michael Pratt for me is somebody who I think is going to go to the Senior Bowl, and he's going to stand out as a name that you might not have heard a lot, but he's going to be a day 2 draft pick for me. I have him pretty locked into that day 2 range.
Yeah, because I had a 3rd round grade on Bo Nix, but at the same token, if McCarthy returns to Michigan, somebody who dominates the Senior Bowl is going to get pushed up to QB4, and someone's going to take that player in the 1st round. There's just too many teams in the market for a QB right now. I mean, you could make an argument for Denver. You can make an argument for the Raiders if they're not sold on Aiden O'Connell, but I think O'Connell gets another year if Pierce remains the permanent head coach. You can make an argument for Seattle now that Pete Carroll's no longer the head coach and he's going to be in a front office advisor role. You can make the argument that Seattle, maybe they take a guy like Penix or Bo Nix, develop him behind Geno for a year, and then once he learns the system, wins over the locker room, they pivot in year 2 or 3. So there's just a lot of possibilities that their 4th QB is going to go in the 1st round. I think I had 7 QBs in the 1st round at the beginning of the year, including Shadur, Ewers, and Van Dyke, but those QBs exposed their weaknesses on tape as the season progressed. So I'm not sure if we'll see 5 or 6 go like I originally anticipated, but there's too many teams in demand for a quarterback right now, and I just feel like with the Senior Bowl options being presented, I had a 2nd on Hartman. I had a 3rd on both Rattler and Pratt. So, I mean, there's just too many options and there's just too much demand for quarterback that whoever dominates the Senior Bowl is probably going to get pushed into the 1st round, regardless of where they end up, Matt.
Yeah, it's a strong Senior Bowl group, and there's definitely potential. I mean, you could go back, to the Baker year. There's a lot of examples of quarterbacks that go to Mobile and their draft stock just skyrockets, right? And
2020 was my 1st year in Mobile. I'm not trying to interrupt, but I went there in person, got the media pass, got to speak with Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love, Justin Herbert at their media days, and to see all 3 of them progress and succeed, it's really rewarding. It's really cool. And you got Tua and Burrow in that class as well. I don't know if we'll have a class of that magnitude at quarterback yet, because I think Nix, Penix, Ewers, Penix Jr., Bo Nix, Rattler, Pratt, Hartman, those 5 are all guys that I could see developing into starters. Milton's the one guy I had a backup grade on, but he arguably has the best arm strength and throwing power and velocity of any quarterback in the class, despite that. So if he can pick up on the mental side of his game, he could be a riser as well, especially if he outperforms the competition in Mobile.
Yeah, I would say, Milton's got a big arm. That always looks good when you don't have the pads on, right? And I'd say keep an eye on Rattler as well, because if you think about Rattler's background, right, he's a former 5-star. He was the number 1 overall quarterback in his recruiting class. And, he's kind of with the thing about these 5-star quarterbacks now, right? Is they're used to these showcase circuits, these senior bowls, all throughout high school. They go to the open finals and the Elite 11 game, Under Armour All American, right? So they go to all these showcase games, and some of these guys, they really know how to stand out in those environments. And I think Rattler had a big improvement in his decision making and processing, his maturity this past year. And he's got like pure arm talent. Like that dude can sling it and he's athletic. So I think, when we go through the practices, especially, which, are the most important things in Mobile, I think Rattler's really going to shine. I don't think he'll get into that first round range, but I think he's going to lock himself down as a, 50 to 80, overall range, which for him, I think is a really good place to get himself to.
Neither do I. I think 50 for range. I think you hit the nail on the head because when he played Georgia, I was seeing him make 3-4 reads in terms of his progressions for the first time and completing passes, which is the big thing I wanted to see from Rattler before I said, okay, this is a bona fide top 100 pick. But you're right. The decision making's not always there. North Carolina game's a prime example of that, where he had a guy wide open. All he had to do was throw the short pass, take what the defense gave him, and he tried to force the deep ball. But, the only Shrine Bowl QBs are Travis and Cam Ward. I know Austin Reed is there. Slovis is there. I do think this is a stronger Shrine Bowl QB group after we had Brock. I don't know if we have a Brock Purdy in this class and Aiden O'Connell, but the Shrine Bowl's produced 2 starting QBs the last 2 years. Do you think there's a guy from the Shrine Bowl, whether it be a Cam Ward or Jordan Travis, 2 guys I had 3rd round grades on? Is there going to be a starter from the Shrine Bowl for the 3rd year in a row? I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts on that, and then we'll pivot to the receivers or the running backs, whatever you think's better, Emmanuel, because I know you want to talk about the playoffs at 10, and I'm going to be supportive of that because you got some friends for Sports Head Radio calling in later tonight. So I'm trying to make sure we cover as many bases as possible within the next 30 minutes.
He won't be able to make it, so I have just Sean from the basketball time.
All right. Sounds good. But you think we should discuss Cam Ward and Jordan Travis briefly, or do you think we should pivot to another position? Because I feel like the running backs, I like Corum, I like Braylon Allen, I like Estimine as far as pass catching, pass blocking, running downfield. I feel like those guys check off most of the boxes. Only boxes that may be uncertain are 40 time or actual game speed to NFL teams, but I feel like those guys are pretty much safe bets. And then the rest of these guys in the Senior Bowl and all these all-star games are basically just playing for jockeying position, trying to catch up to some of those guys. Henderson's still a bubble running back. We don't know if he's going back or declaring. He went 4 for 8 in the 8 pass blocking reps I saw from him. I saw 7 against Notre Dame and 1 against Missouri. Maybe I need to study him more. I'm sure there's some other reps I missed. But, I do like Trey Benson. I do like Will Shipley. There's some things they got to work on, but at the same time, the talent is there for them to develop into NFL starters. What are your thoughts on this running back class? I don't think it's as good as last year's as the top, but I do think there's talent in this draft if you look closely and you got the right running back coach in play.
Yeah, it's such an interesting running back class. I've got about 15 running backs that I've done my film reviews on so far. And if you look, running back 3 to running back, 12, you can make an argument to put those guys in a lot of different orders. For me, it is Braylon Allen as my running back 1, whether or not Henderson declares. And then I think you're going to get Henderson and as running back, in that 1-2 range. And then I think you start to get into Blake Corum, Trey Benson territory. And then it's just this real kind of chunk of players that could go in a lot of different directions over the next couple months. But, I'm a big fan of Cody Schrader. That's kind of my sleeper guy out of Mizzou. I think he's a really scrappy runner. I think he's got great vision, great burst, explosiveness, good play strength. And then, you start to get into like Bucky Irving. So it's a little bit of we're going to see the NFL. It's like pick your poison, pick what you want, right? So like Bucky Irving, I think he's a really nice athletic pass catching back. He's twitchy, he's elusive. Marshawn Lloyd, another guy. He's 5'9", 210, but he comes with explosiveness, twitchiness, athleticism, elusiveness in the open field. Both those guys can contribute to the passing game. And then, you got a guy like Ray Davis who can smash in between the tackles with good lower body strength. Trey Benson, another guy, good lower body strength, has that second gear to him. So there's definitely a lot of depth in this class, but we're probably not going to see a running back go in the first round. I'd say we're definitely not. We might see one go in the top 50. I think Braylon Allen does sneak into that top 50. Travion would be in that conversation, but otherwise, I think we're going to be waiting until day 3 to hear a lot of these guys hear their name called. And that doesn't, that doesn't mean they're not going to be successful contributors at the NFL level, right? But I think we just have to proceed with an understanding that most of these guys, they're going to start in a committee type role. They're going to be a piece of an NFL offense. We're not looking at a lot of guys who are going to enter day 1 as the star of their backfields.
And there's a bear market at running back, and part of that's due to the last 2 drafts. Maybe you can argue the last 3, but I would say more the last 2, because 2021 was top heavy with Najee, with Javonte, with ETN. That was a top heavy running back draft. And then 2022 and 2023 were both deep running back drafts. That's why there's sort of this bear market at running back, because I do like the top 3 or 4 guys enough to take one in day 2. Maybe the Ravens or Eagles takes a running back in day 1, but it's a big if. That's a big if. And the running back basically has to nail the interview process and check off every single box along the way, which I'm not sure that would happen. Even with an offensive line that good, I'm just not sure those teams would go that direction, because there's other areas their team they can improve in. So I think that's what it would take for a running back to go in day 1. But I do think we will see at least my top 3 running backs go in day 2, and then I think anything could happen after that. Part of that's due to the 2025 running back class. I don't want to get too in depth with this, but you do have Singleton from Penn State. Judkins is currently in the portal. Damian Martinez has dominated Oregon State. I think Trevor Etienne, Travis's younger brother, is also in that draft class. I think part of it is a combination of the last 2 drafts were just insanely deep at running back. This running back class, while there's talent in it, it's a notch below the last 2 drafts, and 2025 could potentially be better than this year. So I think it's a number of different factors, along with the running back by committee on most NFL rosters, like you said, outside of the top 2 or 3 backs in the draft.
Yeah, and every draft, it's got stronger position groups, weaker position groups, supply and demand, right? The wide receivers are going to push everybody down this year.
They are.
There's a real argument to be made for 12 to 15 wide receivers that are worthy of being selections in the first 3 rounds of the draft, it sounds like just an absurd number, but I think it's going to happen. So that means every position group is going to get pushed down, including the running backs for sure.
I had 7 receivers in the first round. I think I had 18 receivers in the first 3 rounds back in September. Now, I'm sure that's changed since then, with certain underclassmen going back, entering the transfer portal. I'm certain that's changed since then, but that should tell you how deep this class is, because I think there's a lot of guys. I think there's at least 7 or 8 guys that have the speed and the route tree and the size and just check off a lot of boxes, can run all 30 routes in the route tree and just have every trait you want. They block. Neighbors and Harrison Jr. both block well, so they don't block at elite level, but they block efficiently enough to where you can rely on them when the game's on the line for a big running play. So I think those 2 are pretty much penciled into the top 10. I could see Harrison going before pick 4 as early as 1, but I think the latest he'd go was 4 if the top 3 teams stay put and take quarterbacks. So, I mean, it's going to be a really deep receiver class. You've also got 2 teams with potentially multiple first-round receivers. LSU, I did have Egbuka as wide receiver 2 at the beginning of the year. That's changed. I still think he's a top 100 player if he declares. You have the Texas receiver duo, actually trio. Washington's got a receiver trio as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many teams that have that variety at the position this year. Michigan's got their duo of Cornelius Johnson and Roman Wilson. So, I mean, it's a loaded receiver class, and I have got a feeling your sleeper for next week's show is Malachi Corley, but I'm going to keep my lips as sealed as possible because I don't want to give away anything to your audience, man.
Oh, yeah, I won't give out who it is, but it's not Malachi Corley, but I like the poll there. We'll definitely be talking about Corley. I think he's a fun player, but I think it just alludes to, I could probably give you 5 guesses, because there's just so many good options
I
coming out of
like
this
Troy
year's class.
Franklin and Xavier Worthy, but they're not at the Senior Bowl, so I already know it's not them. I already have enough common sense not to guess those guys.
It's a talented wide receiver group at the
I
Senior Bowl.
know
But yeah,
it. I told my co-host Joey back in September that it's the 2014 NFL draft with the depth of 2020 at the receiver position. That's essentially what this year's draft is, because you had guys like Darnell Mooney who went in the 6th round. I think there was another really good receiver that got picked on day 3. You had Duvernay. You had all these guys. And I think outside of Mooney, most of the 2020 draft class has sort of faded away since showing promise as rookies, year 2 players. Most of the draft class for 2020, the guys that went in the first 3 rounds, those are the guys that are potentially approaching a second payday after their rookie deals are up this season.
yeah, it's I just in the wide receiver group, it's going to be another. What's so exciting to me, and I think I love this about the wide receiver position more than any other. There's so many ways to be a good wide receiver, right? There's no prescription, especially in today's NFL. So, what's nice is last year we had such a small wide receiver class. And you look at this year, you got 6'4" Marvin Harrison, 6'4" Keon Coleman. You have Roma Dunze, 6'3", Brian Thomas Jr., 6'4", Adonai Mitchell, 6'4", but then you got some like smaller guys that I really like too. Like I just watched Jacob Cowing film before we jumped on here. I like Jacob Cowing. I think he's a really effective player. And I think he could shred out of the slot, which is something that NFL players can do now. You can be really effective working out of the slot. And, Troy Franklin, who's a guy who's a little undersized in terms of weight, he's one of my favorite wide receivers in the class, right? So there's just, it's such a good group and you can win in so many different ways. So I think that's one thing that makes this group kind of special as well, compared to the last couple of years.
Yeah, I had for first on Franklin. I like Xavier Worthy. I think Adonai Mitchell's good as well. I had Worthy graded higher, but I feel like you could make an argument for either or guy in the late part of the first round. Leggett could potentially, if Leggett aces the Senior Bowl and the Combine, he could potentially play himself into the latter part of the first round where Justin Jefferson got picked. It's a long shot to happen, but it's not a possibility I'm going to dismiss if he has literally the perfect week.
I think he
draft
could.
Process.
I don't think Xavier Leggett's very far from a first round pick at all. I loved his tape. I think he could definitely go in the first round. If not, I think he's top 50.
Like if he has the perfect pre-draft process, dominant Senior Bowl, dominant Combine, interviews well, like Mozzie Smith did, I could definitely see him going in that back end in the 21 through 32 range.
Yeah. I think he's somebody who should perform. Let me phrase it this way. I'll be disappointed if he doesn't perform well at the Combine, because just what you see on tape, you can see some like really freakish qualities. So, and then of course you always here's the thing about the NFL draft, right? And of course this, but you go to the Senior Bowl, you only have to impress one coaching staff to be a first round pick, right? So hopefully he presents himself well and that character shows up well as well.
Emmanuel, what receivers have you watched in college football this year that have impressed you that you'd like to ask Matt about before I get into the tight end discussion here?
Troy Franklin is solid. I really like Theo Weiss from Missouri as well. There's a couple more. Theo Weiss, obviously the trio you got from Washington. Outside of Marvin Harrison, because obviously he's the clear-cut top receiver in the class.
Yeah.
Is there a legitimate number 2 or number 3 receiver that's pretty much a lock?
I think it's probably Neighbors, Coleman, or O'Dunes, depending on who you ask. But I'm going to let Matt answer that.
Yeah, I can't hear him very well. He said wide receiver 2 in the class.
Yeah, besides Harrison Jr. I mentioned a few guys like Neighbors, Coleman, or O'Dunes, but I think it honestly comes down to who your personal preference of those three is, because those are the guys that seem to be getting the most traction right now.
It is going to be a preference game, but for me, it's pretty solidly Malik Neighbors. I love Neighbors. I think he's an all around, really well rounded wideout. But the first thing that stood out to me is his release. I think the release is something that's really, really undervalued when people are watching wide receivers. If you're able to separate off of press, off the line of scrimmage at the college level, that's something that translates really well for me. So Neighbors, he's got a great release. Sharp footwork. He's got physical hands near the catch point. He creates separation consistently. He closes space quickly. Good vertical ability. You can put him all over. He was a really reliable boundary guy for LSU. I think, he's probably going to play in more of a flanker type role in the NFL, but I think he's going to be able to get moved around a little bit. Twitchy runner after the catch. He's got elusiveness. So for me, he really does it all. I think he's going to be valued as a top 10 pick, top 15 probably at the latest, but I do think he's going to be a top 10 pick because I think there's going to be an early run on wide receivers, and there's going to be a team in the back end of that top 10 that's going to want to grab their guy. But like you said, there's folks who feel like Odunze's up there. I'm a little bit lower than consensus on Odunze. Keon Coleman, I think, is up there in that conversation for some folks. But I think most people would probably say Marvin Harrison Jr. 1, Malik Neighbors 2 at this point.
That's where I'm at as well.
Yeah.
I feel like if the Patriots were to pass on a QB and they took Harrison Jr. at 3, Neighbors would go 4. Whereas if the Bears took Harrison Jr. at 1, Neighbors would go at 4 or 3, depending on what the Commanders, and I think the Commanders are either going Caleb Williams, Drake May, or offensive line, depending on what happens at 1. I don't see them taking a receiver with what they have. I know they could use Harrison Jr., but at the same time, I just feel like logistically, they're either going offensive line, trying to trade up for Caleb Williams, trying to get Cousins. Maybe they go with May and roll the dice on him if they're not sold on Howell entirely and they sit him until he's ready. But I look at those as mainly the options for Washington right now. And then the Patriots could go a number of different ways. They could go QB. They could go with the 2 receivers we've discussed. They could go Bowers. They could go offensive line. It really comes down to what the front office and coaching staff wants to do at that pick.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think Neighbors is anywhere in the 4, 3 through 6 range. The Giants are projected to pick at 6. The Chargers could take him at 5, but they already have Josh Palmer on the final year of his rookie deal. They have Johnston. I do think Neighbors is an upgrade over both, but I don't think he's in play unless they cut both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams to save cap space. And I only think they're going to move on from one of those two, even if they are over the cap as badly as they are. I don't see them releasing both of them outright to save cap space. I'm sure you're in agreement with me on that.
Yeah, I would say so too. And we're going to learn, the thing that makes it a little tough too at this point in time, right? We have so many teams without coaches. So you'll get a little bit of a hint of what a team might do based on what their head coach selection is. So for the Chargers, it'll be really interesting to see if we get an offensive leaning mind here, or if maybe they're going to lean into the core of their defense and look to double down on that. So that's a fun wrinkle in the process that we don't quite have those clues on yet.
Yeah, Neighbors. I'm guessing the New York Giants would be if he fell to 6 for the Giants. I'm guessing they would just pull the trigger and take him there and try to save face with Daniel Jones and DeVito. And if nothing works out, they can get QB1 in 2026 or 2025. Depends on where they're drafting, but one of those 2 draft years they'd get QB1 depending on where they're picking, and move on from Jones at that point, I think.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being the route that they go down there.
Probably. Because I do like Brendan Rice. I do like Luke McCaffrey. I think this is the deepest Senior Bowl group Nagy's ever put together, and I was there in 2020. That was a pretty deep group as well. Van Jefferson. You had Tech Duvernay. You had the SMU receiver the Ravens drafted. I forget his name, but I know he was good in college in his pre-draft.
Prochet, yeah.
James Prochet, yes. Prochet. You had, I think Mooney was there. Claypool was at the Senior Bowl. So 2020 was a deep class when you take the receivers, Pittman Jr., Higgins, When you take all the underclassmen and Senior Bowl guys, it was a pretty deep class. But I also feel like a lot of the players that weren't underclassmen that didn't check off boxes in college they peaked after their first or second year on their rookie deals. Like, that's the thing I noticed. And Van Jefferson, he was dropping balls in Mobile. It looked like he corrected that after his rookie season. And the Rams did win their Super Bowl in his second year, to his credit. But it just feels like Jefferson's gone downhill since that first 2 years. And I don't know if that's because Kupp and Nakua have just dominated, or if it's just a number of different things, because the Rams did move Allen Robinson to the Steelers for a 7th-round pick. So there's a number of different reasons, but I think this group's a little bit deeper. As bold as that's going to sound, I think this group, I see a little bit more of a ceiling with this group, but at the same time, there are some hoops these Senior Bowl guys are going to have to jump through in Mobile.
Yeah, definitely. It's exciting, man. It's not too far away, and it feels like it's kind of there's a few different kind of kickoff points for the NFL draft, season, so to say. And it feels like Mobile is really one of those times that you start to get excited about these guys. And, when you're talking about the depth of the class, like a Ricky Pearsall, like a Luke McCaffrey, right? Like, there's going to be one of these guys that just absolutely shows up in those isolation drills for the wide receivers. And, I go back to Denzel Mims. Obviously, that didn't really work out, but how much can a wide receiver raise their
That was
stock?
actually my longest interview at the Senior Bowl, as crazy as that sounds. 19 full minutes. Spoke with Denzel Mims. I thought he was just going to come in and dominate. And he had a promising rookie year, his final 5 games, and then everything just went downhill after that.
Yeah. And he kind of had a tough situation, tough run of it being in the middle of that jet stretch there. But it just shows, like, you can show up and just show what you have. And, sometimes it could be tough. Like a guy like Luke McCaffrey playing at Rice, like, it could be tough to get eyes on you. Right. And so, when you do finally get that spotlight, you finally get the chance to step out of scheme, even like a guy like Brendan Rice, right? Like, step out of scheme and just get the ability to show what you have. It's a super valuable opportunity, and it's just so exciting because we know a couple of these guys are going to step up, right, and really see their stock rise. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I compared the 2020 receiver class to, I'm going to play a quick analogy here and then we'll pivot to the tight ends, but I compared the 2020 receiver class to digging for gold in a coal mine. I think this receiver class is an oil boom, like a literal oil boom in the most literal sense possible, where there's a ton of oil and it's pouring everywhere, and you're about to make a ton of money if you own an oil plantation. That's what I would describe this receiver class as, an oil plantation with an oil boom.
If you got some picks, you're going to be very happy. That's for sure.
All right. So on that note, we'll pivot to the tight ends. I think there's 3 guys that wowed me. Bowers is by far and away the queen on the chessboard at tight end. I'd say Jatavian Sanders is the rook, and maybe Cade Stover is a knight or a bishop, depending on who you ask. I put him in that category. I know some people would say he's not in that tier, but I put him in that tier because he caught a pass in quadruple coverage against Notre Dame. I don't know how many other tight ends would do that. It felt like they may have only had 3 guys covering him, and then a 4th guy came in at the last minute, but it felt like he caught that in quadruple coverage. That was one of those plays where I'm like, wow, are you kidding me? I saw Gronk do that a few times in the NFL. I don't think I've seen Kelsey do that, even though he's amazing. He's the best tight end in the league right now, even though he's had a bit of a down year. First time under 1,000 yards since his second year in the league. But, Kelsey's still considered the best tight end. I get it. But so he has his own podcast with his brother, Gridiron, New Heights. I've listened to it with my brother when we were at the Shrine Bowl last year in Vegas. But, like, I don't think I've ever seen Kelsey catch it in quadruple coverage. I think Gronk may have once, but I saw Stover do that. Stover still hasn't decided whether he's declaring or not. He's kind of the wild card, and with Denzel Burke going back, he might go back too.
Yeah, I like Stover. I think you're spot on there. He's my tight end 3. I think in terms of when an NFL, put Brock Bowers aside. We know Bowers is great. He's going to be the tight end one. But if you're looking past Brock Bowers, you don't want to make that first round investment into tight end. I think Cade Stover's the first tight end that an NFL team looks at and, kind of sees as a great two-way player, right? You mentioned he's got great hands. He's not phased in contested catch situations. He holds on to the ball through contact. And, for a guy that's listed at 250 pounds, he's got a little bit of a scoot after he catches the ball. Like, he could get some yards after the catch, but, he's also a disciplined blocker. He's got good form. He sits with a nice anchor, and he's fast. He shoots off the line of scrimmage. He reads his assignments well. He's physical. He finishes through the end of blocks. So I do think an NFL team is going to look at Cade Stover, and if you have a plug and play need at the tight end position, I think you'd be happy to add him onto your offense. So, he's my tight end 3 with Jatavian Sanders coming in at 2. But I definitely think he's somebody to get excited about.
Agreed. I've got Bowers in the top 10, top 5, depending on what scout say. I think you could put Sanders in round 2 and Stover in round 3. And those are really the only day 2 tight ends for me at the moment. But, if somebody dominates in the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl in a few weeks, I think I had Jaheim Bell as my tight end 4 and Mitchell Evans of Notre Dame as my tight end 5. Because I really liked what I saw from Evans as a first-year starter. But we don't know if Evans is going to declare or not. The impression I get is he's going back to Notre Dame to play with Riley Leonard next year, because I haven't heard anything, and that's usually a telltale sign that you're going back. But I do like Jaheim Bell. I think he's going to the Shrine game, and I think the Kansas State tight end was my number 1 day 3 tight end, but he could move into day 2 if Evans returns and he dominates the Senior Bowl, because somebody at the Senior Bowl is going to get pushed into day 2 at this position if those are the only top 3 tight ends. Someone's just going to get pushed up. That's how it is, even if you don't agree with the NFL team's thought process. I think it's weaker than last year's draft, but at the same time, I also feel like there's a minimum of 4 tight ends that are going to get picked in the first 2 days.
Yeah, I like Sano a lot out of Kansas State. You look at him 6'4", 245. He's a physical player. He fires off the line of scrimmage. He's one of these tight ends, man. Like, he wants contact. Like, he seeks it out. And so he's going after guys. He's comfortable catching the ball in traffic. He's going to get yards after the catch. He's not the fastest guy, obviously, being 6'4", 245, but he's got a little burst to his game. He's got a little explosiveness to him. And if you talk about a run blocker, I mean, he's physical. He's consistent, setting the edge, sealing there. And he'll get to that second level of the field. And he was doing it against SEC defenses. They were playing Mizzou. My only thing about Sano is I look at him and I think the NFL is going to see a fullback. And so, he might still get decent, he might still get drafted decently high, but we might not hear his name as much if he does get drafted as a fullback, just because I think his skill set lends itself really well to that. And I think, like I said, with his physicality, I don't think he'll mind playing fullback at the next level, but, just kind of a slight caveat on Sano, but I could see him doing really well at the Senior Bowl as well. I think he's got a great story, right? He was a walk-on. He was a non-scholarship guy, if I'm remembering right, and kind of earned his scholarship at Kansas State. So, those types of guys, tend to, they get the nice stories, they get the nice media coverage that goes along with it. And, like it or not, that boosts draft stock.
My sleeper tight end's actually a Shrine Bowl player. I'm not sure if you've seen him. I do have the Colorado State-Colorado game film on Rumble. I have a YouTube channel for individual game film, and then I have a Rumble account for full games that College Game Day covers. We'll try to add some big noon games next year, whatever's available, through film on YouTube to the Rumble, where we just list a list of all the draft eligible players. But my sleeper's Dallin Holker, the Colorado State tight end. As crazy as that sounds, I thought he made some signature plays and really did a superb job taking pressure off of Torrey Horton, player we're going to hear about next year. Could have been a top 100 pick this year had he declared in this amazing receiver draft. Did get a Senior Bowl offer, but he chose to go back. But I also feel like he's a player who, if he had chosen to declare, I feel like he's a player who could have gone day 2. It's crazy as that sounds, but Holker is a guy I really like on day 3. If you're looking for, I don't know, I don't think he's going to be the George Kittle of this draft, but if you're looking for that kind of value on day 3, I think Holker's your man. But what are your thoughts on Holker and Emmanuel? What if you got any other questions about quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends? I know Brendan Rice, we didn't get time to ask him, but I just want your thoughts on Holker, and then I'll let Emmanuel ask any last questions before we sign off. You've been fantastic, Matt. It's been fun to chat with you.
Yeah, it's been a great time. You know what? I have not done the film review on Holker yet. A little bit of live, just kind of seeing him, and I know my co-host John Lobb is a fan of Holker, so he's on the short list for next guys up. But I will be honest with you, in this wide receiver and running back class, it's hard for me to prioritize watching depth at the tight end position. So I haven't gotten as deep there yet, but Holker's on the list for sure.
Well, my strategy is I scout after week 3 of the NFL season. I scout one position a week from QBs to punters. And now that I've scouted every position, I'm at the point where all I got to do is wait for the underclassmen deadline and then tweak my rankings accordingly. It's very simple to the point. It works for me, but everybody's got their own system. And I know Devy people have to focus on the skill positions, QBs, running backs, receivers, tight ends. That's mainly the bread and butter for the draft.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm about 50, 55 skill position players deep right now. And, 20, 22, 23 of those are wide receivers. And so, the tight ends tend to have less priority on the Devy fantasy side of things. So, my process naturally reflects that a little bit for sure.
I think I had 10 draftable tight ends back in September, and I had 50 wide receivers that are draft eligible. I had 42 3 years ago in 2021. I had 40 total receivers. I think I had 50 for this year, and then I was like, I got to stop at 50. This is just getting too freaking unrealistic. We had enough receiver depth to go up to 60, 70 this year, but I'm like, I got to stop. I got to stop myself and cool the jets here, because we're not going to see 60 receivers drafted. As incredible as this class is, I don't think there's that many NFL teams that desperate to upgrade at receiver.
Yeah, you run out of picks eventually, right? And I think a normal year is like about 30 wide receivers end up getting drafted. And then, you usually have about 5 to 10 priority UDFAs that catch your eye. And, I think we'll probably end up with maybe 5 more drafted guys. And then, there's always going to be good UDFAs. You never give up on a UDFA if you liked them through the draft process. That's kind of one of my rules. And I think that's going to come through with the wide receivers, especially this year.
Yeah, it's funny. I had Brock Purdy graded ahead of Trey Lance before the 2021 draft. The day the 2020 draft ended, I had a 91 on Purdy and a 90 on Lance.
Right.
49ers ended up getting both of them, and Purdy, the guy I had graded ahead of Lance, ended up being the better of the two. It's crazy.
It's a good process right there. That's what that is.
Because I thought Purdy could make more progressions than Lance. That was my big thing. I noticed like the day after the draft, but people kept Lance in the first round because of his arm talent.
Right.
Emmanuel, what questions and final thoughts do you have for Matt before we get started with your NFL show?
Yes. I was going to mention some of the tight ends. I do like Vincent from K-State. Jaheim Bell, K Silver, solid. I like Trey Knox. He was a former wide receiver committed to Arkansas. He was a wide receiver. He switched over to tight end. I think it was last year at Arkansas. He ended up transferring to South Carolina. And then I like the team. I tight end from Utah, Brad Cookie, but he's a little bit undersized.
And he might convert to fullback too. We don't really know yet.
Oh, okay. Right on. I know I'm going back. I'm going to go back to the quarterbacks. I know you watched the national championship game. Did Penix expose himself, or what were some of the things that Penix did wrong in that national championship game?
Yeah, Penix in the national championship game. I think for Penix, like, I don't know that he, for folks who have been watching Penix all season, I don't think that he exposed himself. I think that what we saw in the national championship game, you could see at different points throughout the season. But I do think that there are some folks who kind of were only watching primetime games and saw the Texas game and saw, peak Michael Penix, and then we're able to kind of balance that out against a much tougher defense against Michigan. I think in terms of what he did wrong, I thought Penix, as soon as pressure started to get to him, he sped up his rhythm, and not in a good way. He really wasn't working through his progressions. I thought you could see Michael Penix, honestly, even against Texas a little bit, but against Michigan especially, he was locking into pre-snap reads. So I think when Michael Penix feels pressure, he starts leaning on his pre-snap reads. And then his timing was off, right? And with Michael Penix, we talked about his wonky throwing motion. When his timing gets off, his accuracy drops, and he'll specifically throw behind receivers a lot. So, of course, on that one big example was that Rome Odunze miss. And some folks were saying, it was a miscommunication with Odunze, cutting his route inside, but you can watch and Penix is throwing behind Rome Odunze on that. So again, his timing was off, his progressions were off. And I think a lot of it is that, he's comfortable and he succeeds when he's protected within the pocket, but he's not as good once that pressure starts to get to him. And that's dangerous for an NFL draft projection, right? Because there's not a ton of great offensive lines in the NFL. So I think you got to really feel comfortable in your big men if you're going to draft Michael Penix.
I agree, because I do think Penix is the one guy who may be the fourth QB outside of the consensus top three with that ceiling to develop into a Pro Bowler. But the medicals, the way he played in the playoff against Michigan, against a good defense, outside of Oregon with Kyrie Jackson, I really feel like he didn't face any corners that tested him all year. And that's a big reason why his numbers are inflated as far as his regular season production goes.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I mean, LSU, Jane's numbers are inflated too because he played in air raid offense, but he at least dominated against the Alabama cornerback tandem of first-round corners, which is more than you can say about Penix right now, because he had a chance to play really good against Will Johnson and Shane Ristel, and if he had, I think he'd be in the QB3 conversation right now, despite the medicals. I still think he'd be trailing some Pete Daniels on some boards due to the medicals, but he'd at least be in the conversation with Daniels at that point, to where there'd be a window of opportunity if he aced every part of the interview process.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. This was fun, Matt. I really appreciate you coming on. And where can people check out your work? I did post a ticker at the beginning, but if you want to tell people a little bit more where they can find your work, you've got the floor to do that, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's a fun time of the year to be talking about the draft. Rookie Big Board is what I do. Your favorite podcast platform on YouTube as well. We're doing draft 365 days of the year, looking at it specifically from the fantasy lens. It's been great over the last couple of years to be able to identify some of those sleepers, like, Puka Nacua was one of our big guys. Going back a couple of years, Justin Jefferson was one of our big guys. So it's a really fun process to be able to go in there, help out fantasy teams. We do in-depth reports, rankings, super updated over at patreon.com/rookiebigboard. And what's cool about our process is we have direct dynasty and Devy rankings there as well. So you can compare, exactly what Caleb Williams is worth in your dynasty league today, which, is always a fun kind of, it's a helpful insight there to understand their value. So yeah, Rookie Big Board on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, and then patreon.com/rookiebigboard to get access to rankings, Discord. We got lots of good stuff going on over there.
Sounds like a plan. So you heard Matt. Go to Rookie Big Board, follow him on Twitter at the FF Educator, and subscribe to his YouTube channel. I did listen to the receiver conversation you had with Xavier Legette. I enjoyed that very much. It was very informal and educational, and it was a lot of fun to listen to.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on.
You want to give our audience your YouTube handle before we sign off?
Yeah, Rookie Big Board. Rookie Big Board everywhere. Yep.
All right. Just like Draft Utopia everywhere. Rookie Big Board. Noted.
Keep it consistent.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
You too. That was Matt Hicks of Rookie Big Board. Very informal conversation, Emmanuel, but we're about to pivot into some much more exciting stuff. I'm talking about the NFL playoffs, the greatest time of the year.
Yes, indeed. I'm about to end this one. I'm gonna start a new one.
Yeah, I could start a new live stream if you want as well. If
Yeah. I'm gonna do it on my end. So I'm gonna end it right now.
yeah,
Okay.
sounds like a plan.
I'm gonna bring Sean. I'm gonna call Sean.
Yeah, we'll just do your show on your stream, and this will be its own separate thing. That works. All right.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan. Not that I don't enjoy continuing the stream, but I just think that's more convenient for you.